Welcome to Lingua Latina Tutorials with Mr. K, Pensvm D. This video explains the new grammar and syntax found in Chapter 16 of the Lingua Latina per se Illustrata series. It is meant to accompany the Latine Disco text available from Focus Bookstore and the Pensvm D worksheets available from 50%Latin.blogspot.com or christianlanguage.com. Let's get right into the text. The first feature I want to point out is in line 1. We have Italia inter duo maria inter est, quorum alterum quod supra Italiam situm est, mare superum sive Adriaticum appellatur, alterum infra Italiam situm, mare inferium sive Tuscum. So we have Italy is located between two seas, the one which is situated above Italy is called either the Mare Superum, the sea that's above, or the Adriatic. The other one, the one situated below Italy, is called either the Lower Sea, Mare Inferium, or the Tuscan Sea. So, the feature I want to point out here is quorum. So we have one of which. When you have a word in the neuter here, like that's functioning as a noun, with a genitive like quorum, the genitive case here is called a partitive. So one of these things, one of a number. We've seen partitives before, and you're going to see a bunch more in this chapter. So you see in the margin it just means from which, literally one of which is located, is called above Italy. And also quorum here, because it is going with Maria, Italy is located between two seas. Because it's with Maria, it's going to be neuter in gender, and those are the two features I want to point out here with quorum. The next thing I want to point out is the passive form of appellare. So appellare means to name or to call, and in the passive it means it is called. So when we see down here appellatur Romanis, it is called. So let's look at this last line: totum illud mare longum et latum quod inter Europam et Africam inter est mare nostrum appellatur Romanis. So that whole long and wide sea, which is located between Europe and Africa, is called our sea by the Romans. So appellatur is present passive indicative, so it is called. The next feature I want to point out is in line 7. And that is where we have Urbs Roma non ad mare sed ad Tiberim flumensita est viginti milia passu uma mari. The city of Rome is not near the sea, but near the Tiber River, is situated 20 miles from the sea. So here we have, with ad, we have Tiberium, with an im ending. Tiberius, the word for the Tiber River, is one of these rare words which we call true I stems, meaning that the I doesn't just show up in the genitive case or in the ablative, but it shows up also in the accusative. So the accusative and ablative of Tiberis are Tiberim and Tiberii. The next feature I want to point out is in line 8, and we have here quod autem Paulum aquae est in Tiberii, magnae naves in eo flumine navigare non possunt. But because there's little water in the Tiber, big ships are not able to sail in that, to navigate or to sail in that river. The case of aquae here is genitive, of water. Why? Because Again, like we saw with alterum quorum up above, a little bit of water is literally how this would be translated. We would say a little water. The Romans said a little bit of water. This is a partitive with a neuter word, paulum. Because there's little water, there's little of water. Partitive. Next, the next feature I want to point out is in line 16, where we have ostia cita est eo loco quo Tiberis in mare inferum influit. Ostia is located in that place where the Tiber flows into the mare inferum. So why is eo loco in the ablative? Its special name is called the locative. So this is ablative because it is locative. It tells you the location in that place, and you see in the margin, in eo loco, illic, there. So eo loco by itself, without a preposition, in that place. And the name for that is locative. Line 28 is the next feature I want to point out. And we have here, is qui navigara vult adit nautam qui bonam navem habet. He who wants to sail goes up to a sailor who has a good ship. So nautam, we see in the margin here, nautan, nautai. What is the gender? It's masculine. And what's unusual about that is that most of our first declension nouns are feminine, like insula. But there is a small list of those nouns that are first declension that are masculine, usually referring to professions or jobs or some kind of activity that is traditionally in the Roman world done only by men. And so a way to remember the ones that are on that list, that short list, is with the acronym PACAPAINS, P-A-C-A-P-A-I-N-S. And the nouns that are associated with each of those letters in that acronym are poeta, poet, agricola, farmer, collega, a colleague, auriga, a charioteer, pirata, pirate, atleta, an athlete, incola, an inhabitant, nauta, a sailor, as we see here, and scriba, a scribe. So if you memorize that list with the acronym PACAPAINS, it can help you with those few nouns that happen to be masculine. And why that's important is, well, if we were going to say that we have a good sailor, we would not have a bona nauta, we would have a bonus nauta, because our adjective is going to identify that gender. Okay, the next feature I want to point out is in the next line here, si aer tranquillus est, necesse est ventum operiri. So if the air is peaceful or calm, it's necessary to wait for the wind. This word operiri is our first example of what we call a deponent verb. A deponent verb is a verb that looks like it is passive, but it is actually active. Deponens means to set aside or setting aside. It's set aside all of its active forms, or most all of its active forms, and shows up only in this passive construction. But we've translated actively, so it is necessary to wait for, not to be waited for. It is necessary to wait for the wind. Operiri, that infinitive, that passive infinitive, it looks like a passive infinitive, it's actually a deponent infinitive, means the same as expectare, the active, to wait for. The word operiri, then, would fit in the same category or the same conjugation as the verb venire, to come. It's a fourth conjugation verb, but only showing up in the passive. The next feature I want to point out is in line 38 and 39. And here we see vento secundo nave se portu egrediuntur. This ablative construction here, vento secundo, so with when the wind is good, or when the wind is beneficial in some way, ships leave the port. This ablative construction, which is so common in Latin, is called the ablative absolute. Absolutus, or absolute, means that it's been loosened from the rest of the sentence. If we took away vento secundo, we could have a complete sentence all by itself. The naves e portu egrediuntur, the ships leave the port. These ablative absolutes that are really free from the grammar of the rest of the sentence give you the circumstances under which the rest of the sentence takes place. Often a time designation. So when the wind is good, this happens. While this thing is happening, while the wind is good, the ships leave. So you're often going to translate these ablative absolutes with a time word: when, while, as, during, words like that. The next feature I want to point out is the actual deponent here that we had in that same sentence, which is egrediuntur. Egrediuntur is also deponent. It looks passive. It has an untur ending on the end, but it is actually active. It's it's called deponent, which means you translate it as active, but it looks passive. It belongs to the same conjugation as dicere, to speak or to say, and so just like the infinitive for dicere would be dici, to be said. This is agredi untur. The infinitive is agredi, to leave. So with a good wind, the ships leave the port. The next feature I want to point out is in line 46. And we have partes caeli sunt quatuor oriens et occidens meridies et septentriones. Here we have the cardinal directions. The parts of the sky are there are four different directions of the sky, or parts of the sky: the east and the west, the south and the north. And all of these directions, it'll help you to remember them, that they actually come from Latin words that can help you remember them. The septentriones comes from septemtriones, the 7 oxen, or the 7 plow oxen, which is actually the Big Dipper. That was the term they used for the Big Dipper, and there's 7 major stars in the Big Dipper. So septemtriones is the Big Dipper. Oriens comes from oriri, which means to arise, so it's the rising, it's where the sun rises. Meridies comes from midday, the middle of the day, because that's when the sun, at noon, it's at midday, the sun is here in the sky, it's in the south. And then occidens comes from occidere, to set or to fall, and so it's the setting where the sun sets. So we have the north, the Big Dipper, the rising of the sun, the middle of the day, and the setting of the sun. Will help you to remember those 4 cardinal directions. The next feature I want to point out is in line 61, and that is where we have pauca vestimenta, paulum cibi, nec multum pecuniae. So Medus and Lydia are carrying with them few clothes, little food, and not much money. But literally, we have here cibi and pecuniae in the genitive case, and these are more partitives, like I pointed out earlier. Neuter with the partitive: little of food, much of money. It may help you when you translate to think about the literal translation, so that when you create these and when you write these on your own, you remember to use the genitive as the partitive with these. So little of food, much of money, partitive genitives. In line 64, we have another ablative absolute with sole oriente and multis hominibus spectantibus. Sole oriente navis eora me portu egreditur multis hominibus spectantibus. with the sun rising, or while the sun was when the sun rises, or with the sun rising, their ship sets out from the port with many people watching. So notice that both of these ablative phrases could be taken out of the sentence, right? They're absolute. They're not necessary. So you could have now ese ora me porto agreditur. Their ship sets out from the port, but these give us the attendant circumstances. And we translate them often with time words again, like when or while the sun rises, while the people watch, this happens. The next feature I want to point out is in line 72, and we have ego in terra eo multo pucriorem in patria meam Graeciam. So I, eo, am going into a land much more beautiful, into my homeland of Greece. So eo is an irregular verb, eo meaning I go, and you see in the margin that eo is conjugated as eo is it. Imus itis eunt. I go, you go, he, she, it goes, we go, you all go, they go. So you need to memorize that irregular conjugation of eo, to go. Infinitive ire, to go. Line 73 has another deponent verb, medus laetatur, neque iam dominum suum severum veretur. Actually, two deponent verbs. We have medus rejoices, laetatur, again, looks like it's passive. Third person singular looks passive, but it is deponent, so translated as active. Medus rejoices, and now he does not fear, veretur, his strict master. Veretur, a deponent verb from the infinitive being vereri, to fear, meaning the same thing as temera. Notice in the margin, vereri, this passive infinitive construction, looks passive, but is actually deponent again. To fear, the same as the active infinitive here, temera. Same thing with laetari. To rejoice, meaning the same as gaudera, to rejoice. So what conjugations do these belong to? Laetatur belongs to the same conjugation as pulsare. It's the first conjugation. But again, you're going to see it in its passive forms. And then veretur, same conjugation as videra, to see. Or, I think that's the verb we learned before with the second conjugation, in the second conjugation. The next feature I want to point out is in line 91. And that is on the next page. You see here, I'll go back. On line 91, in line 8 we see Paulo post nihila nave cernitur praeter mare et caelum. After a little while, nothing is seen by the, or is seen by the ship except for the sea and the sky. Paulo post. This ablative construction, Paulo, so a more literal construction here would be afterward by a little bit. This is called an ablative of degree of difference. By a little bit after, nothing is discerned. You need to know the name of that ablative construction because it is one of, there's no preposition here, and the name here, ablative of difference or degree of difference. In line 94, we see another example of an ablative absolute with sole duce navem guberno. I steer the ship with the sun as my leader. Notice there's no verb here, it's just two nouns in the ablative. Ablative absolutes can form with just the nouns and doesn't even need a verb to form that construction. Again, showing the attendant circumstances with or while the sun is leading or while the sun is my leader, I steer my ship. Line 98 has an irregular verb. I want to point out, so simul mare tranquillum fit. At the same time, the sea is made or becomes peaceful. Fit, which means it comes from the infinitive fieri, to become, or to be made, and the plural, fiunt, they become, or they are made. It's very common and quite irregular in many of its forms, so it needs to be learned and memorized. So the next feature is in line 123. And here we have navis Paulo levior fit, simulvero tempestas multo turbidior, et fluctus multo altiores fiunt. So the ship is made lighter by a little bit. Here is another example of degree of difference. Here before we saw Paulo post, afterward by a little bit. Here we have lighter by a little bit. We would say a little bit lighter. The Romans said lighter by a little. So the ship is made lighter by a little, or a little bit lighter. But at the same time, the storm is made more violent or more rough by much. We would say much rougher. They said rougher by much. And the waves are made higher by much. We would say much higher, they say higher by much. And in the margin here we see the other example of fiunt, they are made, or they become. The last feature I want to point out in chapter 16 is loco. Medus surgere conatur, nequero se loco movere potest. Medus tries to get up, but he is not able to move himself from that place. Loco here, another ablative without a preposition, gets a special name. Here it is the ablative of separation, because he is moving away from the location. Actually, in this case, he can't move from this location. When you have motion away from a place or thing, the ablative is used. Sometimes with a preposition like ab or ex, sometimes without. When it's without, then we call it the ablative of separation. So those are all the new features in chapter 16. If this is a challenging chapter for you, don't worry, it's a challenging chapter for many. My children call it the evil boat chapter. But if you do spend enough time and you're careful in your studies, you'll be able to grasp all the new concepts and the new grammar and syntax in this chapter.